This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I am your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing.
I got one more thing I'd like to talk to you about right now.
Wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to defend your actions. One of the questions that keeps coming back to my mind that I hope maybe you can answer is when you say no action, no peace, what do you mean? What does Representative Jones mean by no peace? Thank you.
Representative Jones.
Thank you. I would invite my colleague from Putnam County to join any protest where that is a very familiar chant that usually goes, no justice, no peace. And I believe the roots of it lie in something that Martin Luther King stated, that true peace is not merely the absence of tension, but it is the presence of justice. That's what I was saying, is that until we act, there will be no peace in our communities.
Okay, we're going to stop that right there because I need to let you know that you are listening to Justin Jones respond to Representative Ryan Williams. For those that don't know, Justin Jones has been making national news lately, being one of the Tennessee state representatives who was expelled as a representative and then subsequently reinstated after national and local to Tennessee pushback against the Tennessee GOP. And he has made this national news along with another Justin. This is Justin Pearson, who was also expelled at the same time. I do want to get back to what he was saying because I think it's very important. But I want to just take a moment here and let you know that this speaks to me directly. Having been a protester, and I'm 100% sure a future protester, this is exactly a tactic that is used against those of us who are pursuing a more equitable country for Black and brown and impoverished and LGBTQIA plus and women and any marginalized person. This is a tactic that's used against us. They take our words and try to manipulate them or give them some sort of sinister tint, have some sort of perverted angle on what it is we're saying or doing to try to make us seem like we are the bad guys in the situation. And so this individual, Ryan Williams, the Republican representative from Tennessee, asked about what is this no justice, no peace, with the intention of getting Justin to flesh out, sort of war versus peace. Like if you don't give us peace, then there will be no justice. In other words, there will be war, which is not the intention of the saying, as he mentioned by kind of citing Dr. King. Now I want to get back into his words because I think that he dropped some more gems that are really important. So let's do that now.
In addition, I would like to read some context about that chant that comes from Jeremiah 6:14. I'll read the New Living Translation. It says, they offer superficial treatments for my people's mortal wound. They give assurances of peace where there is no peace. I'll go to the New International Version. They dress the wound of my people as though it was not serious. Peace, 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 they say, where there is no peace. That's what the chant means, is that we have no peace. And that until we act, there will be no peace for the thousands of children who came here demanding that we act, who are afraid that if they're in school, they will be gunned down because you have passed laws to make it easier to get a gun than it is to get health care in this state. You've passed laws to make it easier to get a gun than it is to vote in this state. And so that there will be no peace in Tennessee until we act on this proliferation of weapons of war in our community. That is the peace I was talking about. That is what I was saying.
So yeah, these guys are amazing to me. They're brilliant guys to me, man. I applaud them every chance I get. We celebrate them around here. And they are just so sharp and so on top of it. Pull the Bible out on them, in Tennessee, and use it against a Republican. And I happen to know firsthand that those folks do not like when you do that. But let's break it down a bit. Again, from somebody that has kind of been in a similar situation a couple of times in my life, and recognizes this tactic, that these folks use to try to make what it is that we're doing seem more sinister than it is and more adversarial than it is. Think Black Lives Matter, right? They did their best to try to make it Black Lives Matter more, which it was never that. And when that didn't grow legs, they launched Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, and as you well know, White Lives Matter. And ultimately, they did their best to discredit the organization known as Black Lives Matter for spending money in a way that, they didn't approve of. Who knows? They bought houses that were secure, where they could have meetings and not have to worry about people spying on them or flying drones around or, whatever. And then the articles that came out around that, again, made the BLM, the formal BLM folks, seem like they were doing something sinister, which may be, but I have not found that to be the truth in all that I've seen. Pretty much anything that folks try to do, they try to make it seem like it's bad, or that it somehow goes against, the values of this country or the principles of this country or whatever. Some guys that died 600 years ago. Well, maybe not that long ago, 400 or 500, 400 or 300 years ago. Let's call it 300 years ago. That had no idea, no concept of what the world would look like today. Right. So it may as well be 600 years ago. I know I was exaggerating, but since I'm that close, it may as well be accurate, right? 300 years. Could you imagine what 300 years in the future looks like? And anything that goes against what those guys wrote down a million years ago, they push back against as though it's somehow blasphemous to evolve and to situate ourselves in such a way that we can all thrive in a modern world. So, no justice, no peace. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of times conservative folks will point to the murder rate, right? Talk about, there's a war zone. I've seen this in media since I was little. I'm from Compton, California in the 80s. So all that gang stuff, I was around for that. This was before Chicago got off the chain. This is before, Baton Rouge and, all those other places around the country, upstate New York and Buffalo and Niagara Falls, all these places that you hear about. It was Compton, California, right? In my timeline. So when they're talking about war and peace, they might think of it in terms of, well, we're out in the streets and we are going to bring a war to your front door until there's justice, right? In other words, they have taken these words to mean that we're threatening them with war. And I know that they know that that's not true because there have not been wars, not to that degree. There have been, riots here and there, but I think Dr. King was also the one that said a riot is the language of the unheard, something to that effect. Well, when we say no justice, no peace, when we're protesting, me, my children, my friends, the people that I work with that support what it is I'm doing now, what we're referring to specifically is without justice, there is no peace in any of our lives, right? Because you will always look at us and be fearful, and we will live in circumstances where, you know, it is not peaceful. We don't have, you know, that pursuit of happiness that we were promised by those same founding fathers in this country. It's a little bit further away from us, right? So where there is no justice, there can be no peace, right? And I think more important than that is that we should be able to decide what justice looks like for our own communities. And that's another part of this that kind of escapes the narrative, right? Because when people think of justice, especially, you know, folks that don't see the world through this lens, they think of justice in terms of the law. Does the law bring the bad guys to justice? And justice is rather more than that. You know, justice has to do with housing discrimination. Justice has to do with what are we taught in schools? How is the wealth distributed? Have we remedied past injustices? Are we overly policed and unfairly criminalized? Is the criminal justice system in and of itself serve justice to us in the same way that it serves justice to people that don't look like us? We can talk about a list that goes on and on. You know, we can talk about outcomes with respect to healthcare. We can talk about, again, the list goes on and on. And without that, imagine waking up Black in America knowing that everything pretty much is a little bit worse for you in terms of, you know, the outcomes, the metrics that we use to define the health of our society. Is that justice? If you woke up, if you're a non-Black person and you woke up Black tomorrow, would you be at peace with that transition? No justice, no peace. I think it's very simple. And the fact that among other things is taken and perverted into something that it is not, and often used to create fear in middle America and well-meaning white folks who maybe just lack perspective. I think that's unfair, and it's something that we need to know about. And I mean, I'm sure many of us know that this is very much a tactic used by the right, but it's interesting to see it's still on display, right? Because again, if the Republican representative from Tennessee really thought that it was a matter of do what it is that we want, or we're going to bring a war to your front door. Well, the protest already happened. There was no war. So you have your answer right there. So now's the time, as always, I open the floor up to you. Maybe you have a different experience. Maybe you have a different viewpoint. Either way, let's talk about it. You can reach out to me using the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app, or you can reach out to me on all social media at Ramses Ja. I'd love to hear from you. And until I do, peace. This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.